Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, we are so happy to have as our guest, Karen Howard. She is the CEO and Executive Director of Organic and Natural Health Association, and she has spent more than 30 years working with Congress, state legislatures, and healthcare organizations to develop innovative healthcare policy and programs. And she has been very involved with the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. And also, we'll talk today about some of the challenges facing both the naturopathic and nutraceutical industry in continuing to offer supplements for individuals who choose to use this path in healthcare. You can find Karen. We'll have links, live links as well, to organicandnatural.org. And she has another great website called grassrootshealth.net, where there's lots of information about individual nutrients like omega-3s, magnesium, and vitamin D. So thank you so much for being our guest today, Karen Howard.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, it's really great that you are here, but just give us a little teeny background about what brought you into the natural healthcare space to begin with.
Wow. So I had been a Hill staffer on a committee and a lobbyist and a consultant in the managed care world for many years. And then when 9/11 happened, I sat back and kind of reevaluated what it was I wanted to contribute to the earth and to the future of mankind, and realized that I really wasn't in the place that I wanted to be. And when one does that, the universe usually responds, as it did for me, and introduced me to the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians, where I was brought on to, they had moved to Washington, D.C., and were not faring well under a management company. I had never done work like this before, and started part-time, and within 2 weeks was full-time. And then also was the executive director for the American Association of Naturopathic Medical Colleges as well. So I did that for 10 years and learned almost everything I know to this day about this industry, and not so much what the supplement world is about, but more importantly, why it's important to have the options that we have and the practitioners that we choose to go to.
And that's great because you did a lot to actually create a wider array of availability for naturopathic physicians across the state, which I'm doing the show out of New York today. Still, it is not a recognized medical profession in New York.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time, and I'm sure they still are, working on getting states licensed. We saw DC, Maryland, Virginia has not happened. So there's still an enormous amount of work to do, and I continue to be as supportive as I possibly can because it's near and dear to my heart. It changed my life.
Now, in terms of availability for what we can call them nutraceuticals or something like, vitamins, herbs, minerals that people may purchase as products, even that, it's becoming, right now, there's a matter in front of the United States legislature that I think we would like everyone to know about. And one thing is, it's hard to find it. What I'm looking for, perhaps where this might be. Sometimes people send around an email. I think your organization does, the American Holistic Products Association does, where there's something that you can just click and let your thoughts be known to your legislature. I haven't found anything like that.
Absolutely.
If you know of one, let us know, because this is about the mandatory product listing requirement for dietary supplements. Is that something you'd want to share with our listeners? What's going on with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, this has been fairly well covered in the industry press, and now I think it's reached out to more of the consumer-related press as well. But this is a piece of legislation that literally popped up in some ways out of nowhere. And it basically says, we just want you to register all of your products with us. Just simple and sweet, and it won't create any problems. that really divided the industry in several different pockets, because anytime Congress introduces a piece of legislation like this, it's been under DSHEA's, the authorizing legislation that allows us to be able to buy the products we want, is called DSHEA, and it's been around since 1994. And there's been continued effort to sort of change that regulation and regulatory authority by FDA. And there's a strong push and pull between FDA and the industry on supplements. And we have a great reputation. We have great companies who do really wonderful things. And then we have these companies who flit around the edges and sell their stuff on Amazon or at gas stations. And, at O&M, we've done a lot of consumer education around staying away from those things. And they use that as ammunition to say, we just really don't want supplements. And so the way that this bill came to be was not well received by some trade associations in my space, and one in particular really supported it. And as is known to be the case, as this bill began to move through Congress, it became a huge problem. All it takes is a big amendment, which has happened on the Senate side. And the issue is that they've attached this piece of legislation that we think is not good for the industry or consumers, and they've attached it to a piece that absolutely has to pass. Like the world would die if we didn't have the ability to pay for pharmaceutical companies to pay the FDA their fees. And so this piece of legislation, which it offers enormous sums of money to the FDA, must be passed by the end of September. And on the Senate side, Senator Durbin got that attached to this piece of legislation. So it's got this big supplement piece in it. Now everybody's like all up, standing up and jumping up and down and writing Congress. And it also has, Ellen, a piece that I don't think we've talked about before, which is this cosmetics provision, which is, I don't know if people know, but they're cosmetics. And I'm sure most of your listeners are using really clean cosmetics, but most of the cosmetics are not great. And we don't really know what's in them, and they're not tested. They don't require testing as much. So there's a piece in there that regulates the cosmetic industry like DSHEA did for supplements. And it's backed by the industry, and it's getting no press. So there's no objection to it. So now we're attached in the Senate side to a piece of cosmetics supported legislation and drug company legislation. So in the Senate side, things are going very poorly for us.
So where is that at now? Because I've been trying to keep up with it, and it's something that's like a moving target.
It is.
But also like the number of the provision and the name of the law and things also keeps changing. So what I'm looking for is a place that we can give out on air today, if you know of one, where someone, maybe it's your site, can clearly follow this so they know what they want to say to their state legislature.
So you need to go, there's the Alliance for Natural Health has one that they've been using since day one of this issue. And it's the retail one. It's savesupplements.com.
That's what I've been looking for.
Yes, savesupplements.com.
That tells you what this is about. In other words, if these things go through, for instance, N-acetylcysteine, for some reason, they decided to limit access to.
Well, I mean, I think that's one, but I think another thing that the one that I think is easier for people, that is a good one, and restricting high dose supplements. So in Europe, you'll see that.
Wait. This is a whole other new topic. This is big too. So I just want to give this out, and I want to make sure our engineer will add into the description of your show today so people will find it later, savesupplements.com. And I will email that to the power that be, and I'm going to look at it myself as soon as we get off the show today, because I want to know sometimes something like that will have a way to take action that's pretty easy. Like it can go right to your senator or congressperson.
That is what this is designed to do. And it does articulate these issues where risks are associated with passage of this legislation. And it allows, I mean, there are, this is what happens. You have to use these tools when you're up against large industries that are essentially padding the pockets of every congressional and Senate representative we might know. So it's by the people's voice. And this is one of the best ways to do it. Congress has made it slightly difficult for you to get to them.
Yes, that's the whole thing. And then, like you said, what is this about? And
Right.
like its focus changes, its name changes, its number changes, like it's very hard to follow. So that's a really good thing to know, savesupplements.com. And here's some of the issues that Karen, thank God, who's been very active in the politics of both natural medicine and supplement availability, is cluing us into the fact that there might be more restrictions. And one issue you just brought up, we didn't go into it yet, Karen, is the availability of higher dose supplements. What's that about?
It is distinctly possible and so what they want you to do is just register your products. And we already have a registration for that, which I've actually even seen on mainstream press reference, but they need a new registration. And there are two primary things that I see as an issue. And one is if they begin to look at dosage forms of, let's just pick vitamin D since it's one of our favorites. I take 5,000 IUs during this time of the year. I take 10,000 IUs in the winter. And European models are more like we don't recommend anything over 4,000. So it's a distinct possibility that this could be a big issue in terms of high doses. And we all know that the RDAs that have been created are based in faulty data and research, and just makes them ineffective. The other thing about that, though, is that when they are high dose, and you want to think about what happened with the omega-3s. So omega-3 has a pharmaceutical now, right? And it's a high dose. So it's almost as though there's a financial incentive to take those high dose supplements off and make them drugs. So there's
okay. So there's the ticket. There's the ticket, because that's the discussion with N-acetylcysteine,
yes,
which is one of the supplements I use daily because it is so safe and it's so linked to your body being able to create natural antioxidants such as glutathione. Yet someone wants to sell it as a drug, or someone already is selling it as a drug, and because of that, they don't want you to have access to it. Is that what this is about?
It basically comes to that, and it's been interesting to watch over the years the change in the industry itself, and there is so much more pharmaceutical engagement. Like so many of our good supplement companies are now owned by pharmaceutical companies.
That's a big one. Let's say that again. Many of the nutraceutical and vitamin, mineral, and herbal manufacturers that you may know are now owned by the pharmaceutical industry. I'm even going to name one because this isn't secret knowledge. Something, let's say, like New Chapter is owned by Procter & Gamble, and Garden of Life is owned by Nestle Corporation. A lot of people don't know that. And I'm not saying that that makes them bad. They can be absolutely fine. I'm just saying there's a progression of the pharmaceutical industry to take over the natural products industry, and in particular the nutraceutical industry.
And it's functional for them.
So now you feel, and you're explaining that very possibly these laws are there to support the pharmaceutical industry making further profit from natural products.
Distinctly possible, based in old stories about how dangerous our products can be and how polluted they can be. And, the story behind it doesn't match the data. So there is, another incentive behind that, which is always look for just follow the money. You have to just follow the money.
Well, it seems throughout the years, and you've been doing this a long time, Karen, and let me reintroduce you at this point and our listeners to the fact that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse at naturalnurse.com, and my guest today is Karen Howard, and she has been working in the nutraceutical industry for many, many years. I would say would we say like on the political end, you're not a healthcare provider. You're
Correct.
Supporting that people will have the ability to use natural medicine, both in terms of naturopathic medicine, natural health care providers, and in particular nutraceuticals, which are naturally based products. And this seems to always be kind of a war against that happening. She gave us a great website to look at, savesupplements.com, as well as her website, organicandnatural.org. So these are some of the places you can go for further information. But let's get back to that now. Dick Durbin, in the many years I've been involved with the political side of this issue, his name has come up a lot.
Yes, and it's his original bill. The good news about this is that Senator Durbin's been doing this long enough that everybody kind of anticipates it on a regular basis. And that piece of legislation does not exist in the House side. So at this point in time, everything's kind of ground to a halt because the Senate committee has finished their work. Senator Romney tried to amend the bill and was shot down in committee, and they're just waiting for a floor vote. So for everyone out there who's got a United States senator, all your senators need to hear your opinion because this is now headed to the full Senate for a vote. But the real power play for anything being changed right now is on the House side, where everything has been handled very differently. And this is the House Education and Commerce Committee. And all of these people on the House side, of course, are standing for election right now. And they're all home for the most part, trying to get your listeners' votes, although the Congress is in session this week. And anything can happen on any given day. So it is a rather urgent situation. So on the House side, we're working very hard on the Energy and Commerce Committee to make sure, because this will go to a conference if they keep it as a standalone bill. It'll go to conference, and the House has just done what they're supposed to do and passed it on the floor, and they're done. So now the House and the Senate are probably talking as we speak about what to do about this problem. So we're working there. That's where we're working to try and, keep things clean on the House side. It would go to a conference, and then that would all be fleshed out. So it's a great time for people to write. And if you are a retailer listening, I encourage you to go to sossupplements.org because the retailers have even higher risk at this because they would be liable for some of these things based on the way the bill is written.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that when there's a requirement in the legislation on the Senate side, it actually impacts independent retailers and how they would be liable for the products on their shelf, and especially the ones they privately label.
Wait a minute. What do you mean liable? If somebody got sick, or what would that mean?
They would, for registration rules, they would have to have their products registered. It would cost them an inordinate sum. Most of the independent retailers have moved to private labeling some products on their shelves. And so they would have to participate in the registration process. And abide by all these rules that they've set up for supplement companies. So they haven't excluded retailers from these requirements. And on sossupplements.org, that's explained, and it gives you the same opportunity to write. So we've been working closely with the independent retailers. SENPA is a member of ours, and trying to support their work, and they're doing a lot they're getting their independent retailers to meet with their local congressmen. So if that is an important component of this.
Okay, and if you did, what do you want to say? Like if you're either an individual or someone else part of the actual process, what are you asking for? For the law not to go through, for the law to be changed, for it to be disconnected from that required legislation that supports the drug companies? What exactly are we asking for?
Definitely asking for this not to be passed.
Okay.
That is
and when we say this, what is the name of this?
So I guess we're going to have to use the Senate number, which is Senate 4348.
And that's today. Those things change over time.
S.4348.
Okay.
And this is where it's a little more complicated when you talk to House people because they don't have this legislation anyway. Yes, correct. So what you want to say to your House member is this bill is moving through the Senate. Bill S.4348. It looks like it's going to be passed by the Senate. And when it gets to the House, we want you to vote no. And both of these websites, whether you're a retailer or a consumer, explain that and actually have letters written for you so that you can edit both of them to your heart's content and then send it directly to your member of Congress.
Okay, see, that's what makes it complicated. So I'm hoping that if we do visit savesupplements.com or sossupplements.org, there's something that people can just click and it will be reflecting, if you agree, of course.
Of course.
So even if you're an individual, you may not be able to take the time to deeply look into all of this. But what Karen is telling us, after being an activist for over 30 years, is that these regulations that are now being proposed in the Senate, already written up, and also the House, could endanger your free access to certain supplements. Like I know NAC, they already said you're not going to be able to buy it, although it's still on the market. Maybe you can tell us why. Or that it will be available, but only in lower dosages, which means you can still take higher dosages, but you probably have to take 10 pills instead of one that you're using now.
Right. Foolishness. So NAC is one of those it's a complicated story about why they think that should not, that the status of that should change. And that's probably another 30-minute conversation.
Oh, but could you give us just a quick reason?
So when the law was passed to authorize dietary supplements, if there was anything that was produced and on the market before 1994 was okay, and they're saying that NAC was not on the market before 1994, therefore it can be a drug. Again, there's a financial incentive behind turning NAC into a pharmaceutical. That's where this always goes back to. And so there are lawyers who have this conversation every day. And there is a strong effort. It's one that we talk about at our organization about changing the way that rule is written. It's called preclusion. So we have conversations about that, but everyone's, as you can see why, terrified about actually opening up the authorizing legislation to make small changes, because this is what happens. It starts off a good story and it becomes a nightmare.
So what I did was I just stocked up on NAC because it seems like you will still be able to get it, but you might need a prescription or it'll become an over the counter. Yeah. And when that happens, the manufacturing changes, because while some of the supplement companies add very little fillers and non-toxic, then when it's available as a drug, it has red dye in it. It's all kinds of colored. It's much more expensive. It really changes.
And that decision has not been made. So I don't want everyone to panic, but these are the kinds of things that your trade associations are out there working on all the time. And this is one that we are constantly in conversation with FDA about. It is a very good example. So at the end of the day, the likelihood of this one passing, I think is still about 50-50. And the only thing that can tip this back to our side, if people do go to these sites and begin to write their members of Congress, and I want to, as I don't know the word to use, but the way we feel about politics now these days, I mean, it can keep people from being activists, and there's a feeling of sort of dismay and a lack of power. And I would just encourage people that this is it. Like, this is how we do this. This is an election year, and this is when they want to hear from their constituents. And half the time they're going to be in your backyard because they can't afford to be in Washington when they're running for office. So whatever venue you can, if you're politically active, use it. If you want to go and see your congressman, go to a rally, go to a fundraiser, doesn't even have to give anything, and start really expressing your voice on this. Because I think if we're successful, and I believe we will be, this is great, but this is just an endemic kind of problem for us and emblematic of a way that we need to be moving forward. And that's where I want organic and natural health to go, is we're always consumer driven, and that's how do we support the consumers in their ability to get this information and to really rally people around the industry and access.
So the simple message we want to share with our senators and congressmen is that we want to keep open access to our supplements. I mean, I know some of it is couched, like you said, in safety issues.
Yes, they do couch their defense of this on safety. But I mean, if people say, I have been taking dietary supplements for X amount of years and, my health is good, I don't want to lose access to the products that I use to support my health. And, the other piece of this that I think is just it resonates with everyone, which is that this is a waste of money. This does not add anything to the safety of these products. It's like $7 million in starting costs just to start it 1 year, which is like 70,000 hours of enforcement activity. They're spending their money on bureaucracy, and that's not how you want your tax dollars spent.
That's a good point too. So do you have an example of like you talked about vitamin D, how would the access to milligram amounts of vitamin D or a different nutrient, if you want to use that as an example, how would that change?
How it could change would be that they would set their threshold at basically, what the RDA is and the safe limit. So the safe limit, I'm going back, I'm trying to remember this, the safest limit that they will allow on vitamin D, I believe, is 10,000 IUs, I think. That goes back to our petition that we did to FDA for vitamin D and breast cancer. And but they do have an upper threshold, and they have upper thresholds for, if not all, most of these products. So my assumption would be that they'll take the upper threshold that they've defined as safe, and I would restrict it to that to be available to a consumer. But that's
so there would be, the bottom line is there would be actually a lot more regulation of natural products.
Yes, they are already highly regulated.
It's going to raise the price because then the manufacturers, be they a smaller local health food store or the larger manufacturers, are going to have much more regulatory concerns and costs.
Yes, in a time of great inflation.
So
we are, I don't think people think about this so much, but this industry is the second most regulated food in the country, only second to baby formula.
And you saw how the baby formula went. Babies died from the baby formula.
Yeah, go clean up that mess and then come back and talk about supplements.
Oh, my goodness. It really is a mess. But it has to do with personal freedom. It has to do with personal choice. And at the same time, there are bad actors in the nutraceutical industry, those who just don't follow any of the rules and say whatever they want and say, take this and it cures cancer or whatever they want to say.
Yes.
And so that's what gives fuel to the fire to increase that regulatory focus.
And yet, let us remember that the data shows that the incidence of adverse events for dietary supplements are negligible versus pharmaceuticals.
Just minuscule. I've been following that for probably 40 years. I've been doing this since 1964. And every now and then they have one bad actor that'll have, something like 10 people got ill. But at that same time, thousands died from the use of commonly available pharmaceuticals.
And just know that almost every staffer on Capitol Hill and virtually every member of Congress, except Durbin, are taking dietary supplements.
Yes, and I know Mitt Romney actually worked very hard to downgrade this regulatory aspect of this law, but he was overruled.
He was.
And, wow, that went so fast, Karen. We're almost at the end of our time together. I'm so happy that you came on board. Listeners, take action. Go to savesupplements.com. and sossupplements.org. Those two places have an immediate action button. Well, thank you so much, Karen. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com. inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.